Hi book lovers, welcome back to my channel. I have my February wrap up to do today. I read a total of 12 books. It was a bit of a slower reading month for me just because I was doing stuff. Didn't have as much time to read, but I do have two new favorites. I actually talked about these two books already in my last video, which is all about books that I'm currently obsessed with so far in the year. I've been reading a lot of new to me authors as well, authors that I'm excited to read more from. So let's just jump into it. Here are all the books that I read last month. Starting off with my first read of February, which is Ashes of You by Cowles. This book is the fifth and final book in the Lost and Found series. This is Lawson's book. We're finally getting his romance after all this time. He is the last of the Harleys to get his romance, and he is the chief of police in their small town. He's the single dad of 3 boys, and he actually met the heroine Hallie a few years back when he literally saved her life. Now, this girl has been through so much trauma and pain in her past, but she is a survivor. She's yet another strong, vibrant heroine from Cowles, and honestly, one of my favorite things about reading a Cowles book is her heroines, and Hallie is another fantastic one. So it's been a few years since Hallie and Lawson first met, and now Hallie returns back to Cedar Ridge. She returns home and she finds a new job as Lawson's nanny. She helps take care of his 3 boys, and she builds this wonderful relationship with all of them, though the oldest son is definitely the moodiest and the hardest to get to know. But all the boys were also very wonderful in this book. They're so incredibly endearing, and I always love reading about good relationships between main characters and kids. And the romance here is a little bit slow burn, but it makes sense for Hallie and Lawson's characters just because of what they've been through in their pasts. But they were perfect together, so I gave this one 4 stars. It was such a wonderful read. I love the way that Lawson was so protective over not just his boys, but Hallie. We have some good suspense woven in throughout the book, just like the rest of the Lost and Found series. And for a finale, it was a great ending to the series. I mean, I'm still sad that it's over, but Cowles did a great job with this one. My next book was Toxic Love by Jagger Cole. This was my first time reading Jagger Cole. I read this one as part of my dark romance reading vlog. I posted that video like a month or 2 back, but this one I liked it for the most part. I'm giving it like 3.5 stars. It's a dark enemies to lovers marriage of convenience romance with some mafia elements. I wouldn't necessarily call it a mafia romance. It's more mafia adjacent. I mean, the hero isn't technically part of the mafia, he just works with them, and it's because of them that Dante is forced to get married, and he is supposed to marry this barely legal girl that he doesn't even want. Tempest, the heroine, is technically the bride's niece, but she's older than her aunt. And in order to protect her young aunt, Tempest marries Dante in her stead without Dante even knowing. So already these two are off to a bit of a crazy start with their marriage of convenience, and they do have some fantastic chemistry between them. There is a ton of steam here after they get married, like a lot. Is a bit too excessive for me because they kept sleeping with each other, and it got so repetitive. I kept being like, oh, we're doing this again. And like I mentioned earlier, this isn't really a mafia romance. There's not much mafia elements to it. I wish there was more of it, but the romance itself is still fun and entertaining. I did like Tempest and Dante. Oh, and another thing is that you learn pretty early on in the book that Tempest has this fatal disease, though don't worry, it does end in a happily ever after. So that does add even more drama to the whole story. So even though I didn't love this book entirely, I did enjoy the writing, and I do eventually want to read more from this author, continue on with the Venomous God series, or maybe try another book of his, because I have gotten a couple recommendations for his books. Before we get on with the rest of this wrap up, I wanted to say that today's video is brought to you by My Dark Desire by Parker S. Huntington and LJ Shen. This is the standalone sequel to My Dark Romeo, book 2 in the Dark Prince Road series, and this is Zachary Sun's romance. We have another billionaire romance, but this time it's a Cinderella retelling. We have a heroine who's lost her father, and she's currently living with her evil stepmother and her 2 stepsisters. All Pharaoh wants to do is gain full ownership of her family's cleaning business and also get back the pendant that her father owned, and the only way to do that is by stealing it from Zachary Sun. Zach is Raven's a businessman with an ice cold heart, but as soon as he meets Pharaoh, she lights up a fire within him. When he catches her trying to steal from him, he forces her to work as his exclusive maid. If you love good banter and chemistry, you'll definitely love Zack and Pharaoh. So make sure to check out My Dark Desire. It's currently out now on Kindle Unlimited. I'll leave a link down below for you to check it out. A big thanks to the authors for being today's sponsor, and back to the rest of this video. I also tried out another new to me author, and that's mostly because my library got a bunch of her audiobooks, so I borrowed like a whole series. It's the Branson University series by Bree Blackwood. Book 1 is called Devious Game. It's a dark noodle romance set in college. We have a second chance enemies to lovers romance between former high school sweethearts. Raven and Nash were everything together back in high school, even though they were total opposites. Like, Nash came from a very wealthy family and Raven did not, but they loved each other until Raven is forced to leave him. She's forced to leave town and leave Nash right after they graduate high school, and she doesn't tell him why. So now Nash just thinks that she up and dumped him and ghosted him for no reason. And once they reunite at Branson University, he hates her and he wants revenge. He wants to hurt her for breaking his heart, but obviously there is a lot more to the story than he thought. Although, to be honest, when the reveal came, it was kind of underwhelming, the reason why she actually had to leave. So I was like, okay, Nash actually had a good reason for being so mad. It gets pretty ridiculous with all the drama that happens throughout the series. Like, there's an accidental death or a pretend death. It gets wild. It's a little all over the place. Like, the writing isn't the best. I feel like the author tried to do too many things at once, but I will give the author props for at least making me hooked onto the series. And I did appreciate that Nash wasn't entirely awful to Raven. Like, I wouldn't call this a bully romance or anything. He does very quickly want her again and want to protect her again. Overall, I would give the series 3 stars. It wasn't the best. I mean, there's a lot of messy parts, a lot of parts that made no sense. The execution sometimes wasn't all that great, but I could see what the author was trying to do, and it was at least interesting enough for me to finish the trilogy. And then I got to one of my favorite reads of 2024, which is Serpentine Valentine by Giana Darling. This one, 5 stars. I loved it so much. It's this dark sapphic retelling of Medusa. It's set in college, where the heroine, one of the heroines, is sexually assaulted by her professor. Unfortunately, no one believes Lex except for her sisters, so she wants revenge now against that professor and also the school president who didn't believe her. And the way she gets revenge against that president is by targeting the president's daughter. So we have quite the messy and angsty and emotional romance between Lex and Luna. It starts off in a nefarious way, but pretty much you realize that there's this beautiful connection between these two. Luna has no clue why Lex enters her life, but as soon as she does, Luna can't stop thinking about her. And from the very beginning, there's this insane chemistry between these two. It like leaps off the pages. I loved it. I was riveted to the romance. I loved Lex's whole journey from trying to get revenge and ending up finding love instead. It's gut-wrenching and powerful and so good. And then I read Servant to the Spy Day by Ruby Dixon. It's actually been a hot minute since I last read Ruby Dixon, partly because I guess I've fallen out of love with her books, but also she just has way too many and I just can't keep up anymore. So this one is actually part of a series that I love, the Aspect and Anchor series. It's a novella. It's like 3.5. I love the first 2 books. Those 2 were incredible. This one, unfortunately, I ended up giving 3 stars, which I'm so sad about because I really wanted to love it. I have been dying to read this book, like these characters, since they were first introduced in the first book in the series in Bound to the Battle God. I was so intrigued by those characters, but the romance ended up being so boring, which is crazy because it's white shoes, it's reverse harem, there are spider webs. Okay, let me go back to the beginning. So this one is a fantasy romance novella with a heroine and 3 heroes, although technically the 3 heroes are one being. They are the god of fate. He's just in 3 physical beings. They're known as three aspects, and Yelena, the heroine, becomes their anchor. She's the human who allows them to survive. She is a former sex worker, so she's not really doing anything different than she used to. I'm just so sad about this one though. I really did not expect this to be as boring as it was. I wanted more excitement, more fun, especially like I said earlier, there are spider webs involved. Not like actual spiders, although there are spider pets. It's not like that Tiffany Roberts spider romance, okay, but I was so underwhelmed by these characters and the story. So yeah, I really can't give it more than 3 stars. My next read was The Wrong Bridesmaid by Lauren Landish. I have heard so many things about Lauren Landish, like she is always in the top Amazon charts anytime she has a book, but I've never read her until now, and I'll admit I wasn't entirely impressed. I gave this one like 3.5 stars. It was okay, but I did get this one because it's one of the free audios you can get through Kindle Unlimited. It's the first book in the Cold Spring series. It's the small town romance series, and it's also a wedding romance. The groom is the best man and the heroine is the maid of honor. Of course, it always goes like that. So Wyatt and Hazel first meet at this local restaurant over a game of pool, and sparks are flying between them, but then as soon as Hazel learns that Wyatt is a Ford, she wants nothing to do with him because Wyatt's uncle kind of rules over the town and not in a good way, and he wants to rezone a lot of things and displace people and businesses. For a small town romance, I guess it's pretty cute. We have this big cast of characters. A lot of them are pretty cheeky and funny, but I never connected with these main characters like at all. Sparks were flying between them when they first met, but I personally wasn't really feeling it. The beginning is also pretty slow paced, and there's nothing all that unique about this one. Like, it's definitely good for a lighthearted and fun time, but I can't say it's anything memorable either. And then I also tried out C.W. Farnsworth. I read Fake Empire, and this one I liked a little bit more. I'm torn between 3.5 stars. Like, it was close to a 4, but I also had some issues. This one is the first book in the Kensington series. It's got a marriage of convenience, an arranged marriage between 2 very rich people so that they can get even richer. But hey, I love billionaire romances, so sue me. I actually was super into this one in the beginning. Like, the first half was so good. I love seeing Scarlett and Crew kind of circling each other when they found out that their marriage was actually happening, because they were arranged to each other, promised to each other when they were younger. There was a lot of good tension, so I did enjoy the first half, but then I don't know why, the second half of the book, it just slowed down dramatically. The story lost its spark. It became all about the characters being super hot and cold with each other constantly, just not communicating. I also don't remember the hero, Crew, doing all that much, like contributing to the romance. He was very robotic. I did like the writing though, and I did actually like Scarlett. It seems like a lot of people don't like her, but I personally love to read about ice queens. Scarlett was a CEO boss bitch, okay? So even though I didn't love this one fully, I still had a pretty good time with it, and I was also craving a marriage of convenience when I picked this book up, so it did still hit the spot. And then The Book of Azrael by Amber V. Nicole was my book club's read for February. This was for Ravished by Romance. We picked this fantasy romance, and oh my gosh, this was so good. I give it 4 stars. This is the first book in the Gods and Monsters series, and it was so much fun. I was highly entertained when I read this one. Even though the world building here is a lot and we're still left with a lot of questions, by the end of the book I was still really invested and fascinated by it all. This fantasy world is made up of different worlds. The hero, Liam, he's king of a world that was destroyed because of a war that he was involved in. And then Diana, the heroine, and her sister's world was also destroyed because of this war, so Diana ended up giving up her life to save her sisters, and now she's turned into this very powerful monster. I still don't know exactly what she is, but it's super cool. and super strong, but she's basically enslaved to Caden, who is the one who turned her and who threatens her sister if Diana doesn't listen to him. And Caden, being the evil man that he is, he's trying to find the Book of Azrael in order to rule the world. And even though Diana and Liam are enemies, they are forced to team up in order to find the Book of Azrael before Caden does, and, you know, save the world. I really like these two characters. I thought they were both complex and interesting. Even though Liam is a god, he is dealing with PTSD and trauma from when the war happened and it destroyed everything that he loved. And I did love the fact that Diana was actually 1,000 years old. She was not, you know, this very young creature compared to a very old hero. The romance is also very, very slow burn. Not much happens until way towards later on in the book, but I see a lot of good potential here. Like, I cannot wait to read more of Liam and Diana in the next few books. Book 3 is coming out in a couple months, and I'm definitely gonna be binging books 2 and 3 once that's out. I think it's supposed to be a pretty long series, like 5 or 6 books. So unfortunately, I will have to wait no matter what. But I thought this was a great start to a fantasy romance series. I can definitely see why a lot of people love this one, and I'm definitely looking forward to reading the rest of the series. I also read Crossed by Emily McIntyre. This is book 5 in the Never After series, and this time we have a dark retelling of The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And yes, the hero is the villain, so he is that priest, except he's hot. Father Cade's job, besides being a priest, is basically to destroy evil and sin, so he is a murderer for hire. He moves to the heroine's town to do some more work, and as soon as Cade meets Amaya, it's like insta-lust. He wants her like he's never wanted anything or anyone, but he also considers her a sinner because she's a stripper. She strips to provide for herself and her younger brother. So Cade is supposed to kill her, but he can't bring himself to do it. Instead, he becomes her stalker. He obsesses over her constantly. Like, he's actually so tortured and angsty over Amaya. It was kind of hilarious. Like, in the same breath, in the same thought, he would think about killing her and then sleeping with her. Clearly, the man has issues, but I will say him being a priest wasn't that much of a deterrent for the romance. It didn't really make anything all that forbidden. It was mostly the heroine being forced to be engaged to an evil man from their town. I didn't expect it, but the heroine does spend quite a bit of the book engaged to another man that she hates and doesn't actually want to marry. She's blackmailed into it though, because she wants to protect her brother. But of course, Cade and Amaya still sneak around with each other and it gets crazy hot. Like, this book was steamy. Lots of good dirty talk here from Father Cade. I still gave this one 4 stars though. I had a great time with it. I was just very amused by everything that happened here. I guess if you're in the mood to read about a psycho stalker murdering priest, then you should pick up Crossed. And then my final read of February was the book that wrecked me. This is The Nightingale by Kristin Hannah. I read this historical fiction book for another book club that I recently joined, and yeah, I bawled my eyes out over this one. It's a freaking World War II book, okay? So of course I cried. It was absolutely gut-wrenching, and I can see why so many people loved it so much, why it blew up when it first came out years ago. So this is set in France during World War II from the very beginning, with Hitler invading, the Nazis taking over until the end of the war with liberation. We follow 2 storylines here, Isabella and Vianne, who are 2 sisters. They are complete opposites though. Vianne is a mother and a wife, and she's a survivor. All she wants to do is protect her family, protect herself and her daughter after her husband is sent away to fight in the war. Isabel is a rebel, and she actually joins a group of rebels to fight against the Nazis. Both of them go through some intense trauma and heartache. I mean, how can you not during war? And I just love the fact that even though Isabel seems like the only fighter between the 2 sisters, Vianne is also just as much of a fighter as well. They're both survivors, they're both fighters in their own ways, and their stories were just so powerful and so visceral. I could not put this book down as soon as I picked it up, and yeah, I bawled over the ending here. Like, the last few chapters got me going. I was a total mess, but it's an incredible book. And honestly, I don't know why I don't read more historical fiction because I used to love it. So I guess thanks to this book, I should get back into that genre. So those were all 12 of my books that I read last month. There were a couple amazing books, but also quite a few flops as well. Let me know your thoughts if you read any of these same books, and also if you have recommendations for any of the authors that I read, especially the ones that I do want to read more from. As always, links to everything will be down in the description below. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!